New York is an awful, awful place. They have gun control, which results in racism. Yeah, I know people are going to get mad at me for that, but we'll break this down. You have a city that wants to implement this harsh gun control so they target minority communities for a variety of reasons. You have a city that is right now saying no protests allowed in direct violation of the First Amendment. It's literally the first one on the list. Come on, you had one job. Yep, Bill DeBlasio says you can't protest. So here you have New York. You've got homelessness, unemployment, escalating rent prices. Certain parts of the city are in total collapse. You've got police consistently accused of racism. You've got harsh gun control measures that don't seem to be working. And that's New York for you. You know what I really don't understand? Like when I tweeted earlier that New York was a racist S-hole. And I had a bunch of conservatives be like, that's not true. And I'm like, why are you defending New York City, dude? No, this place is run like trash. Bill DeBlasio does not know what he's doing. He went out early on and was like, come everybody, celebrate and go outside and party. And then New York, it turns out, is the cause of most of the infections in the entire country. Like people from New York traveling around, spreading it around. So no, I am not going to defend Bill de Blasio. I'm not going to defend Michael Bloomberg or Rudy Giuliani. The city has been awful for a really, really long time. Stop and frisk is a horrible policy that, in my opinion, and for whatever it's worth, violates the Fourth Amendment, walking up to random young people, pushing them up against the wall and frisking them. What's the Fourth Amendment for? They say, oh, but it's reasonable. Yes, stop and frisk is about their gun control measure. So stop defending this awful city, its awful policies, the racial disparities in their policing. Michael Bloomberg coming out and saying in a recording, he was like, well, they're the ones committing the crimes, so we have to go to their neighborhoods. It's not racist. Shut up, man. You've got impoverished communities that you don't support. It's about class, first and foremost. That's what I want to break down, right? But when you end up targeting poor people with your gun control measure that results in a disproportionate amount of them going to jails, you realize that results in long-term negative prospects. So put it that way. I'll take it easy. You know what? The point is, if you go to rural areas, you don't see this stuff. You don't see this in more conservative areas. Maybe that's why they want to run these stories about, these two guys in Georgia and this guy, Ahmed Arbery. The reason they want to exaggerate about these claims and lie is because they need to convince the world that it's the conservative areas where all of these horrible racist things happen. Let me tell you what. I've lived in the South, sort of. I lived in Virginia, and I have seen some very awful racism, more than I've seen in a lot of places like New York. But if you want to claim that New York is better, and you literally have the police going to minority areas for gun control reasons, targeting minorities for gun control reasons, creating a disproportionate amount of minorities in jails, y'all got the serious problem, okay? If a person in down south is a bad person with bad ideas, well, you can avoid him. You can insult them. That's America. Sure, it sometimes leads to fights and tensions. We have laws against that. But if the law enforcement themselves are doing this, come on, stop defending New York. You know what, man? I know Donald Trump has defended stop and frisk. He's wrong. And there have been a bunch of conservatives that have defended this. And I'm sorry, man, y'all are wrong. The government doesn't have a right. First of all, this is a violation of the Second and the Fourth Amendments. I have never been a big gun person, but straight up, the goal they had with this kind of policing is gun control. They shouldn't be doing it in the first place, let alone arbitrarily stopping people in violation of their Fourth Amendment. It is unconstitutional, and it disproportionately affects poor people. And in New York, the minority communities tend to be the poor, poor neighborhoods where they get targeted by this. You think that you're going to see the NYPD show up to Upper West Side and go knock on some penthouse door and look for weapons or stop a man in a suit? Never going to happen. Because while I do believe race plays an issue in a lot of these issues, when you can't play that game because it really is about poverty and class. Because, yeah, if there's a white dude wearing a Dago and some sweatpants, he'll get similar treatment. It affects Latinos. It affects everybody. But that's New York for you. That's what I can't really quite figure out. I can see the hypocrisy from many of the leftists when they talk about gun control and wanting more of it, but then complaining about stop and frisk and talking about the rights of individuals and the policing, but then consistently voting for these same people who keep enacting these things. Oh man, I don't get it. I don't get it. But what's really weird to me is that there are conservatives who come out and defend New York for any reason. There's a reason I left, man. I know. We should read the story. Bill DeBlasio and the NYPD commissioner. No protests allowed in New York City. Let me stop you right there, New York City. That's not true. You can't do that. That's the First Amendment. You will make no law establishing, blah, blah, blah. You shall not be infringed, right? New York City Mayor Bill DeBlasio and NYPD Commissioner Dermot Shea stated outright this week that people are not permitted to gather for protests in public due to the coronavirus pandemic. The city leaders pointed to the need to maintain social distancing in order to prevent greater spread of COVID-19, stating that this takes precedence over people's rights to exercise their First Amendment rights of free speech and assembly. Wrong. Remember when Donald Trump was debating Hillary Clinton and he would lean over and go, wrong, wrong. That's what I want to do right here. That's what I'm going to say to you, Bill DeBlasio. Wrong. NYPD, wrong. No, you can't do this. We have a right to protest. That's why it's called a right. The government has no ability to infringe upon that right. Unfortunately, as we're learning, they do. You know why? Because they're going to come out and arrest you. But man, I'll tell you what, Bill Barr was not sparing any harsh words. The Constitution is not suspended. Boy, are there going to be many lawsuits in the days, weeks, months, and years to come. It's going to be a backlog. I'll tell you what. What are they going to do if you go out and protest? They're going to arrest you? What about the people in Indiana right now who are protesting due to an unarmed black man? Well, actually, I don't know if he was unarmed, according to the story. They're chanting "No justice, no peace." Look, some aren't some one person's wearing a mask, others aren't. They're certainly not social distancing. What about them? What about New York City? Y'all gonna go out and protest for Ahmaud Arbery? You're allowed to do so. Do it with my blessing. Go protest. Are they gonna do it? It's not against the law to protest. In fact, the First Amendment guarantees it. And just because Bill DeBlasio says it doesn't make it a law. I hope YouTube gets that through their thick heads. You're not supposed to advocate for breaking the law. Well, Bill DeBlasio has banned his YouTube channel. How about that? He says, "You're talking about some of the values we hold in the highest regard in this country, and certainly in this city. The right for people to gather, the right to free speech, and the right to protest." I'm sorry, this was Shea, said during a Monday press briefing. But now comes the bad news. We're in a pandemic, and executive orders have been issued. So what? These are laws that have been passed down through executive order. No, they're not. They're not laws. That's not how executive order works. To keep people alive. While we greatly respect the right of people to protest, there should not be protests taking place in the middle of a pandemic by gathering outside and putting people at risk. You want me to go get in my van, drive up to New York? You're getting really close to make me get my van, drive up to New York. You can't tell people they can't protest. You don't pass laws through executive order. Executive orders are not laws. They're executive orders. They're orders to the executive branch. Okay, I get it. New York is a state. Its laws function differently from the federal government. They say the announcement came a day after the Reclaim Pride LGBT advocacy group protested Mount Sinai Hospital's relationship with the Samaritan Purse Christian organization, which set up a field hospital in Central Park for COVID-19 patients in an effort to reduce Mount Sinai's load. The group objected to the hospital working with the religious organization, claiming that its leadership has espoused bigoted views. Now listen, I'll be the first to tell you, you are insane to protest an emergency hospital. You're nuts. And I will be the first to tell you, you are allowed to protest. And I will defend your right to protest. In fact, I will say thank you for protesting. Standing up for what you believe in is a God-given right, and it is protected under the Constitution because we had smart founding fathers who understood why it was so important. So you know what? I would now ask you to direct your ire towards Bill DeBlasio, who is threatening your right to protest. While I certainly disagree with your protests, I would like to see you continue voicing your opinion legally and lawfully. And if Bill DeBlasio has a problem with that, then I will absolutely defend your right. Now, I'm not quite so close to saying I would actually drive up there and stand next to you to protest. But if I lived in New York, I'd come down and join the protest 100%. And I'd have a sign saying like, I disagree with this protest, but I agree with their right to protest. Something to that effect. We can't function this way, man. The Constitution is Swiss cheese. That's what I said earlier. It's Swiss cheese. If no one will defend the Constitution, then what's the point of having one in the first place? Now, I get it. It does constrain law enforcement in most times. But if in an emergency, the government can just snap its fingers and say, you know what? No more rights. Then you don't have rights at all. The Constitution is meaningless. They are permitting you to do these things. how any police officer, NYPD, would actually break their oath. That's what they're oath breakers. So I don't know if the NYPD actually swears an oath to uphold the Constitution, but they aren't, and they haven't. And this goes beyond just what this is. I mean, NYPD has been bad in a lot of ways, even going back to Occupy Wall Street. Never mind my disagreements with the leftist protesters. This is we're past the slippery slope, man. I think one thing we can learn from this is that Americans have not defended their Constitution. And because of this, it's almost meaningless. It really is. Like, I understand it still has value. The Supreme Court, current laws as they're written, there are lines. But if the mayor of a city can just come out and say, we have suspended your rights, then you didn't have them to begin with. They're God-given rights. They don't come from the government. But if the government can just snap its finger and take them away, then what's the point of the First Amendment at all? Americans have not and are not defending their Constitution. And that's a fact. I'll leave it there. I'll see you all tomorrow in the next segment at 10 a.m. on this channel. Thanks for hanging out. I'll see you next time.